I was thinking about how you price in energy properly. It's a really hard problem in many different ways. I'm not an expert at all, but I've thought about this a lot in terms of thinking of, the energy supply that we have access to. And the reason why it's kind of an interesting problem, many of you know about these things, but we've got a limited amount of resources, and one would think that it would, the prices would sort of increase for this energy usage that we have. I'm talking about particularly fossil fuels. We use a lot of fossil fuels. We use, whether it's coal or petroleum or whatever, we use a lot of that for energy usage. One would think that, the price would increase, but it hasn't really increased as much as one would sort of look at. If you look at the long-term average, it's kind of like just a general kind of steady incline in terms of its price, but not a lot over time. And the reason is, excuse me, my throat's tickling. The reason is that we're innovative, right? Like, people come up with new ways to sort of think about, efficiency of the things that are sort of burning up the energy. The other thing is we're becoming, better at sort of finding these energy sources throughout the earth. But here's the thing that, that is striking, and I struggle with this, right? It's not necessarily, I'm not necessarily concerned with the energy use being petroleum or, being organic material per se. It's the fact that this material is really old, and there is potential to understand something in the future that we might be able to use this in a different way that could be extremely useful. We just don't know what that potential is. So I think it's foolish to sort of burn through this fuel or through this natural resource that is really old as a energy source. We're literally burning up an energy, or burning up a resource that is millions and millions of years old that we can't get back. It's hard to get back. The challenge is, what do we do here? It's not necessarily like, that the prices are going to sort of skyrocket. I don't think that that's going to happen anytime soon, in terms of we're going to find innovative ways to find this stuff. Efficiency overall is going to start increasing. So don't think that there is going to be dramatic increase, but I would prefer, because this is a limited resource that is hard to get back, we're never going to get it back, I prefer that we find a different alternative energy source, right? So I'm definitely all in favor of solar energy and alternative energy sources like wind power and things like that, because those are relatively easy to sort of correct if we make a mistake, right? Like, if we put up too many windmills in one spot and it sort of changes the wind patterns too much, is massively disruptive, we just take those down, right? Like, we find another spot where it's not going to be disruptive. And because everything that we do, you got to remember that everything that we do has an impact in this world. We can't sort of take away that impact. And so we have to sort of figure out, what do we do with this massive problem that we have? And the massive problem that we have is, it's a good problem. Lots of people are living on Earth that have not lived on Earth before. That means that many people it's a very prosperous Earth that we live in. But the challenge is, what do we do? How do we sort of sustain this? What does that actually look like? And what are the different alternative energy sources that we can get around that don't consume something that is hard to get back, right? So, for example, we might consider different types of solar energy, not necessarily like solar farms, but we've got a lot of energy that's being sort of kicked back into space, right? All of the solar energy that is reflected off of roofs, for example, is an incredibly inefficient way of of dealing with energy is, instead of using that to heat our energy, what we do is we burn fossil fuels that are old. We can't get that stuff back, and instead of just simply putting up some pipes in getting to the point of making some sort of tool or some sort of equipment that can use pipes that can be heated up during the day to heat the hot water and some sort of energy storage, instead burn millions and millions of year old resources, which makes no sense to me in terms of what we're doing. So I think we have a long ways in terms of shifting what we are actually doing or how we're sort of consuming energy. Now, the question is, how do you actually get there, right? It's not just a matter of sort of supply and demand and all of that kind of stuff. There's a lot that goes on to it, right? You need innovative people that are going to think of things. You need people to sort of consider that they can do this. You need a lot of gumption, like a lot of things that are not just market, supply and demand and all of that kind of stuff, right? You also need to have the political forces that are going to be somewhat stable. It's because it's become politicized. Lots of people sort of stay away from this stuff. They don't want to get into that battle, right? Because they're like, well, I'm going to get beat up if I get into that battle. So we need to sort of figure out how to deal with these larger macro issues that are really plaguing us at this moment, that are holding us back in terms of these bigger things of how do we inspire the next generation? How do we get people to think about that they can do this and solve these problems that are actually pretty minor, to be honest. If you think about it, we have an energy source that's extremely powerful. It's beaming on us every single day. And yet we choose not to use it. We can think of different ways to power that, whether it being a solar-powered boiler of some sort, so it heats up some liquid of some sort, whether it being water or some sort of coolant, whatever, right? Like, we need to have more people doing these kind of things, but then we also need people to be inspired to actually go into this direction. Simply not because of, we're going to run out and the prices are going to skyrocket and all that kind of stuff. It's more of like, what the heck are we doing here? We've got this resource that is millions of years old and we're consuming it. I would love to have some of this resource in the future. It's like the same thing. It's a sort of irreversibility that drives me bananas. It's the same thing as when I see another, aggressors bombing or blowing up ancient artifacts or something that is, that is truly cool that we can't get back. Whatever that thing is, it's sort of reversibility aspect of it is really important to think about. So I'd encourage you to sort of think broadly, do what you can in terms of, moving in this direction. So, there's a sort of belief that there was, everybody sort of pitch in and all that kind of stuff back in the 1980s. I don't think that works that well because some people are going to be penalized. However, you could do your sort of minor thing to actually get there, whatever that is, to minimize your impact and just do the right thing of doing this. And sometimes it means overpaying for some things. But also sometimes it just means like you don't necessarily have to overpay, but if there's two alternatives that are pretty equally similar, and one is, maybe just a fraction of a hair more expensive, maybe consider that if it is less consuming of these different resources. But it's a hard problem. I don't know all of the answers. I think what we do need is a lot more people going into clean tech, and people coming up with sort of innovative solutions to market, not only, do the technology behind clean tech, and as well as, the sort of new energy sources, but also thinking about how to market this and sort of the business side of things and making a case for it. That's all I want to talk about. All right, take care and have a wonderful day. Bye.